Alright, Canon R5. Launch is just done. Let's go through some of these specs and break it down a bit. Oh my goodness. Pause, Peter. What are you doing? So I've been beyond excited for this camera to launch. It is like, I'm kind of seeing this like when the 5D Mark II was released, and that really disrupted the whole market. Like stuff that people had never seen before, and it really was like a turning point in, you know, how camera manufacturers really make cameras. So hearing about this and seeing this launch now, this is definitely that disruption that the industry needs, and it's just gonna set the standard for all cameras moving forward from pretty much this date onwards. Right, so the big thing they hyped up was obviously the 8K video, and they did not disappoint here. So what do we got? So we've got 8K 30p in RAW 422 10-bit C-Log. And it's internal as well. You don't have to add any external monitors or external recorders. You get it internally. That would be because of that CFast Express and because of the Digic X processor. So the Digic X processor is the same processor that's in that 1DX Mark III, and they actually combined two processors together. That's how they're able to get better battery life and more performance out of a single chip, and how they're able to actually make some of this stuff possible they're coming out with. Having no crop in 8K is an absolute blessing in disguise, because this is the big thing that everyone was worried about. We're worried that, okay, we're gonna get 8K, we're gonna get 8K RAW, whatever, but what are gonna be the limitations? And from this, it seems like there's actually no limitations at all. Dual pixel autofocus 2.0 is going to be insane. You know, on this channel, I always harp on about dual pixel autofocus on all my Canon cameras and how good it is. And for me, hands down, it is one of the best autofocus systems on the market currently. So now they've brought out dual pixel autofocus 2. I am super excited to test this out and see just how good it is. I don't know what they could improve. It's already so good, but having 100% coverage in that whole zone, it's gonna be able to stay locked on to whatever your subject is and keep it tack sharp no matter what. Now, the biggest thing that I am beyond excited for and really keen to test out is the IBIS. So Canon mirrorless or DSLR cameras have never had IBIS in this. So this is the first of its kind in the Canon EOS lineup. So it's a 5-axis in-body stabilization. So they say you can get up to 8 stops of image stabilization, but that is with the stabilized RF lenses. So I'm not sure exactly what it's gonna be without. I'd say around 3 to 4 stops. I'm pretty sure the RF lenses have a 4 to 5 stop stabilization. But what they said in the launch is that the camera works with the lens. So the lens kind of like has a few different vibrations that it looks for, and the sensor actually looks for some different vibrations. So that's how they're able to get 8 stops of image stabilization, because the lens is looking for certain things, the camera is looking for other things, and then when you pair it together and they actually talk to each other, you can basically get this perfectly stable image. And they were actually saying in the launch event that the photographers were taking 4-second long handheld exposure, and that the images were like tack sharp. So how like upgrading the face and eye detection is going to be a big thing. Hopefully this one can detect my face with glasses on. That's the only downside about the EOS R. When I put glasses on, it just really struggles to grab my face, and especially struggles to grab my eye. So hopefully, I mean, it says features eye, face, and whole body detection. So be interesting to see, and especially with the dual pixel autofocus 2.0, be interesting to test it out and see if my face can now get picked up by their autofocus system. Being able to shoot up to 20 frames a second is amazing for those event photographers or sports photographers, but I think if you want to use the actual mechanical shutter, I think it goes down to 12 frames a second. So the 20 frames a second is if you bring the shutter up and use the digital curtain or whatever it's called. A 45 megapixel full frame sensor is absolutely insane, and you're gonna get so much detail on all those landscape shots and even just portraits. Like when you zoom in, you're gonna see all those pores, gonna see all those pimples. Nothing is safe on this camera. Now, I'm so glad that they've gone with a dual card slot, but a CF Express and an SD card. So the bad thing about the 1DX Mark III is that it's got dual card slots, but they're dual CF Express. And CF Express is not cheap, but I get it. Like, you want the most performance and you want to be able to quickly switch between them and get the best performance out of the camera. But having a CF Express and SD card means that if you don't want to upgrade to those CF Express cards that are very costly, you can just chuck your normal SD cards in there. It is UHS 2, so you're going to still get some pretty good speeds, but it means that you don't have to upgrade to those CF Express cards. Now, they've gotten rid of that slidey thing on the EOS R, which I literally never use. I don't think I've even touched it. And they've put a AF joystick stick on there like the old cameras, which is so much better. Like I understand they wanted to try something new and see if it worked, but obviously there's a lot of feedback saying that people didn't like it. So very stoked they've put that AF joystick back on. I used to use it so much on my 16 Mark II, so I'm very happy to have this back on the camera, and I'll definitely be using it. Now 4K 120 frames a second is the thing that I was most excited about, and no crop and dual pixel autofocus 2.0 as well. This is the most exciting thing, because the reason I don't use 4K in the EOS R is that you have that crop, but also that it's only 25 frames a second. So if I want to do any slow-mo stuff, I have to drop it down to 1080, and then it just doesn't really look as good. So I generally stick to 1080p on the Canon EOS R. So I'm very excited to test out what the 4K 120 frames a second looks like on the R5. Now time-lapse mode you can do in full HD 4K, and now you can actually do 8K time-lapse as well, which is really good. So I generally use the 4K time-lapse feature on the EOS R, but it would be good to have that bigger resolution in case you kind of want to like reframe or do some punch-ins and stuff. So 8K time-lapse is going to be a very good thing. And it says 5,940 autofocus points is absolutely insane. It means that when you are actually focusing and when you're using that tracking, it's going to be super duper detailed. Like it's just going to be able to stick on the subject instead of having to like kind of jump around and try capture it. It's literally going to be able to stay on it like there is no tomorrow. It's going to be like stuck on there likely. So we've got 8K DCI and Ultra HD. So DCI is that cinema format. Ultra HD is obviously the 16:9. 4K at 120 and 100. Amazing. So that's actually really interesting. There's no 100 or 120 frames a second at full HD. It's only in 4K. I don't know if that's something they'll fix in a firmware update, but that's kind of weird. You don't get 60 frames a second at full HD. But it is 10-bit, which is really good. It does have C-Log. So it doesn't say anything here about the compressions. That'll be something we'll have to test out when we actually get our hands on the camera. Now the HDR PQ mode is something that I am very like ridiculously excited to test out. So basically it's oversampled 4K, which means that it's taking the data from the 8K and sampling it down to 4K, which means that you're gonna have like ridiculously sharp 4K images coming out of this. And if it's HDR as well, it means you're gonna have crazy amounts of dynamic range as well. So there's some really cool stuff that's coming out in this. Now for the price tag, let's have a look at it. In Australia, Canon R5 on the website, $7,099. That's probably a bit more than I was hoping for. I was hoping around the 6. Okay, that's kind of taking me by surprise a bit. But let's think about this. So it has the Digi X processor, the exact same one that is in the 1DX Mark III. It's a brand new one. It's what's actually made this camera actually possible. It just has so much power, so much speed, and it's allowing you to do this 8K RAW and all this awesome capability that's in this camera. Plus the fact it is the only camera on the market currently that shoots 8K RAW internal. So like, what are you expecting? It's not gonna be a cheap camera, but $7,000 it's a lot of money, but it's also not that much. But in comparison, it'll be interesting to put this side by side with the C200s, because you can pick up a C200 for around 9,000, 10,000 Australian dollars now. So for a couple of grand more, you might be able to move over to a C200. Interesting to see what the quality is like having that 8K or that 4K oversampled compared to the 4K coming out of the C200. And then really quickly, let's just touch on the R6, because that was also announced, and I'm actually probably more excited for the R6 now looking at these specs. So the R6 has that 5-axis IBIS built in. It still has the 8 stops if you pair it with the lens, which I'm very excited about. It shoots up to 12 frames a second mechanical or 20 frames a second electronic, same as the R5. It only shoots 20 megapixels, but so it's not gonna be like your crazy photographer if you want heaps of detail and stuff. But I mean, I don't shoot that much and I don't really blow stuff like that big anyway, so for me 20 megapixels would actually be okay. Now it doesn't shoot 8K, it doesn't shoot RAW, it only shoots 4K 60 frames a second as the max resolution and frame rate. But again, 4K 60 is perfect if you're just vlogging or you're just shooting content and you don't really shoot much, you know, 100, 120 frames a second. 60 frames a second is really good. And generally with the Canon EOS R, I'm shooting on 1080p at either 25 or 50 because I'm shooting on PAL. And the reason I don't use my 4K is because there is no 60 frames a second or 50 frames a second option, so I just don't even bother with it. And hopefully, I'm assuming there's no crop with it as well, which is going to be very, very exciting. And it's also 10-bit, which is actually very exciting. And it has dual card slots, just SDs, no CF Express. And I'm going to get my hands on an R5 very soon to test out, so I'll be able to give you a full review of that once I actually get to test it out. And I'm going to try and get my hands on one of these R6s as well and kind of put that side by side and just see kind of what I think is better for my style, what I think is going to be better for you guys as well. Now guys, this was a very quick one. I wanted to get this up as soon as I watched the launch video, so it might be a little bit rusty, might be a little bit all over the place, but thank you for sticking around, and I hope you got some valuable information out of this. I hope you learned a bit more about these new amazing cameras that have come out. Canon did release a whole bunch of lenses as well. I'm not going to talk too much about those, but go check out the website. I'll leave a link down below to the R5, the R6, and just a website so you can go check out all the new stuff that they have brought out. If you did enjoy this one, then consider liking and subscribing. And as always, guys, stay creative and just be you. See ya.